Hey, this is Pastor Darvin with Mission Lakewood Church. We're coming back to you guys with our Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning devotions that you'll be able to find on Facebook and YouTube and our website over these next weeks. My whole point of doing these is that as we're all kind of on a little bit of a lockdown, that God would use it as a time that you can get in His Word more. The whole point. Get to know His Word more. And today we're going to be taking a look at Psalm chapter 51, only the first 4 verses. It's so dense. So if you've got your Bible, turn to Psalm chapter 51. And here's the thing. As you read through the Psalms, what you're going to notice at the top of a lot of those is headings. They're kind of an introduction of why we think that psalm was written. And the interesting thing about those headings is that the reason they don't get verse markers and they're not a part of the chapter is that most scholars don't think that those were part of the original writings, but were written pretty soon after. And we really think they're a good indication of why each of these chapters in the Psalms were written. So this one's really interesting. The header on this psalm is fascinating because it really tells you why it's being written. So here we go. Here's the header on Psalm 51. It says this: "For the director of music, a psalm of David, when the prophet Nathan came to him after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba." That's a bomb dropped, right? Like that tells you this is so important. I mean, this is the crisis in David's life. So if you don't remember the story, let me tell you the story real quick. David became the king of Israel. Stuff is going really well, and then David does something he shouldn't, like when we put ourselves in situations we just shouldn't be in that lead us to sin that we probably should never been in. David stays home when his whole army goes out to battle. So he's like the only dude in Jerusalem. It's filled of women, and just David. And wouldn't you know it, he's on his roof one day, he looks down and he sees a really hot woman and decides that he's going to call her up and sleep with her, even though he knows it's Uriah's wife. Uriah is one of his buddies, one of his soldiers, and he sleeps with his wife. We have no idea how consensual or unconsensual this was, but it was horrible. It was wrong. They even conceive a child through this, and then Uriah is called back by David to Jerusalem. David tries to trick him into thinking that he's really the baby daddy. And when Uriah won't bite on the trickery, then David sends him out into battle and says to his men, hey, let Uriah go first out into battle. And then when he's out there, just kind of all retreat, leave him out there so he's dead. Now, where I come from, if you arrange for someone's death, that's called murder. So now David has had an affair. He's murdered somebody, and then he's going to lose his child. That child is going to die. And the prophet Nathan, God sends the prophet Nathan to totally call David out. And at first David's like, who are you to be telling me this? But then David realizes, I've sinned, I've done wrong. And in the days of grief, after he realizes his sin, he sits down to write a song. He sits down to write this psalm. And it's an incredible psalm, and there's so much here. So here's actually how we start in verse 1. Verse 1 starts like this: "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions." So you can hear him saying this in his grief as he realizes he's really messed up, right? That he's really done something just awful in his life. And the second word here is mercy, right? Have mercy on me. Now, a lot of times we mix the words grace and mercy. So let me break it down for you. Grace is when God gives us something we don't deserve. Mercy is when he does not give us what we do deserve. So grace is when God gives us a gift that we haven't earned, but mercy is when we have earned God's punishment, and yet he does not give it to us. So all the way back in 2 Samuel, the prophet Nathan, when David admits that he really has messed up, says, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You're not going to die." So what he was saying to David was, hey, look, David, you deserve to die for this, man. You murdered somebody. You had this affair. You got another man's wife pregnant. Your own child died. It's all your fault. You deserve to die. But God is not going to give you what you want, not what you deserve. That is mercy. You don't get what you deserve, right? So David's just throwing himself at God's feet saying, I've messed up. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and yet you gave it to me anyway. And then he says, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Now, the word transgressions is different from the word sin. Sin means miss the mark. Sin means miss the mark. And sin can be you not doing something you weren't aware that you should do. Sin can be just a condition of your heart. Sin is just a part of our nature. And so sin is different from a transgression. A transgression is when you know you shouldn't do something and you go and do it. Like there's a willfulness to it. And so David's saying, not only am I sinful, not only do I have this messed up nature, I actually went and did something that I knew I shouldn't do. And we've all done that, right? Like we've all known God's rules on things, known his law and his will and his best for our life, and then gone and intentionally done the other thing. We have all transgressed. We haven't just sinned, we've all transgressed. So he says, have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity. Now, iniquity is different than a transgression or sin. It has a little bit of a different wrinkle. Iniquity is an actual act. It's a behavior. And he knows that he's done this repeated, willful, wrong behavior. He has this iniquity. He says, wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. So he knows he can't do it on his own. He's got to rely on God's mercy to take away his sin. Then he says, verse 3, for I know my transgressions and my sin is always before me. He's waking up to what he's done. He's waking up to not just what he's done, but who he is. Remember, a transgression and iniquity is what you do, but sin can be who you are. And David is finally waking up and he's looking in the mirror and he's seeing that he's sinful. He's seeing that he's a messed up person. He's finally waking up and seeing the reflection of who he truly is. It's kind of like if you've ever gone camping for 5-6 days and you kind of forgot what you really looked like because you haven't looked in the mirror for a while, and you come home, you're like, ooh, I am dirty. I am nasty. I have soot and smoke all over me. My hair is sticking all crazy different ways. And you realize just how messed up you were. It's easy to forget it when you're out camping for a while. And then you come back, you look in the mirror, and you kind of wake up to, ooh, I need to take a shower. I need to take care of myself, right? This needs to get cleaned up. And it's the same thing with David. You know, when things are going good in life, like they had been for David, it's easy to convince ourselves, ooh, I'm doing pretty good. I'm fine, right? I don't really need God. God is just an inspiration. God is just someone to encourage me. God's just someone to help my plans fix themselves the way I want them to go. But then we look in the mirror and something in our lives needs to wake us up to look in the mirror and see that dirty face and see that dirt and that sin and that iniquity and transgression go, oh yeah, that's who I really am. I actually am messed up. I actually really need God, right? My sin is always before me. Then in verse 4, he says, against you, you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judge. So he says, against you, you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. You know, one of the fallacies of our cultures, we will say things like, well, if it's not hurt anybody, how can it be wrong? I mean, if I didn't hurt anyone else, it's not wrong, right? No. Everything we do that is against God's word is against God. Not just if it hurts someone else. Even that wrong thought, even that thing we did behind closed doors, it's not wrong just because it hurts someone else. It's wrong because it's against the ways of God. And David has realized that, and that's why he says, against you, you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. That's what matters. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judged. You know, one of the funniest little tattoos people put on themselves is, only God can judge me. And what they're saying is like, don't judge me. What they forget is God's going to judge us, right? He is. And that's just a reality, and that's what something David is really just waking himself up to. He's waking himself up to. And so here's the whole point of these 4 verses, is that it took David, this big event, it took David a death, an affair, a murder to wake him up, to get him look in the mirror and go, yeah, okay, I really am sinful. I really am not doing okay. I really do need God. I really am only going to rely on, as verse 1 says, your unfailing love, your great compassion. I've got nothing to bring to the table. I am dirty. I am done trying to pretend like I can do this on my own. He has given up on trying to be good, and he's realized it's all about God's love. It's all about God's compassion. He's had to wake up to this. So here's the thing. At one point, he was viewing his sin as insignificant in his life. And so he viewed God's salvation as insignificant. And we do the same thing. If we don't realize that this is who we are, that we are people who are sinful, who have transgressions, who have iniquity, if I do not know my transgressions, if my sin is not always before me, as David says in verse 3, if I'm going to think my sin is insignificant, then I'm going to think God's salvation is insignificant. I'm going to think the cross is insignificant. And that is usually how we go through life. We think of our sin as too insignificant. And so we don't realize how significant it was that Jesus came and died for us. Actually, there's this great quote by one of the church fathers, Jerome, in the 300s. He said this: a great sin needed great mercy. You will only realize how great your need for God's mercy is if you realize how great your own sin is. So here's my hope for us, is that with David, it took him a death and a murder and an affair to wake up and look in the mirror. My hope is we don't have to go through that, right? My hope is that I've seen people have to go through things like that in their life to finally get them to wake up. Like I've seen friends and family have to go through a divorce or a death in the family before they woke up, looked in the mirror like, wow, I need God. Like I can't do this on my own, right? And my hope is that we don't have to go through that before we realize our need for God. My hope right now during this super weird time is that just seeing some of our own needs being like, oh, what happens if the grocery store is empty? What do I do then? You know, what happens if my kids don't go back to school for months? How am I going to get by? What happens if I do lose my job? When these things that are going to come up during this time of the coronavirus and this panic and everything that goes along with it, my hope is that these things that are way smaller than something like a death or an affair can point out our need for God, and that this difficult time, whatever it is for you, however it's changing your life. I mean, our small group met online yesterday. It's changing everyone's life, right? So all these changes, I hope one of these changes in your life is what it takes to wake you up and to get you look in the mirror and go, okay, I've got that dirty camping face. I'm sinful and I have iniquity and transgression, and that's who I am. And that sounds like a depressing message. But here's why it's actually the most hopeful message in the entire world. Here's why it's actually the most joyful message in the entire world. Is that when you're making the mistake that David had made before this moment in his life, of thinking that he could do it on his own, that he really was a good person, that he really had this figured out, that he really could, figure out his own flaws and take care of himself and save himself. When you're on that kind of mindset, it's like one of those Stairmasters in the 90s. Remember those Stairmasters? You kind of keep taking steps, but you don't go anywhere. You're just kind of going around and around. Well, that's how it is when we think we can really make it on our own in life. When we take our sin too insignificantly, we don't take our need for God significantly. And so we just think we're doing it on our own, but really we're not getting anywhere. And we're never going to be satisfied in life because we're never going to get where we want. There's always going to be that next step that's popping through the Stairmaster. But when we realize we're sinful, when we realize this is who we are, when we look in the mirror, when we wake up, we're like, I've got nothing to bring to the table here, right? I'm messed up, not okay. When we figure that out, the great joy is that our value no longer comes from what we're doing. Our value no longer comes from how good we are. Our identity no longer comes from our accomplishments or our perfections. We all just say, you know what? My identity, my joy, my value, I'm not going down that Stairmaster. Nope, I'm just looking up at God, and it's all going to come from his unfailing love and his great compassion. And that doesn't change, and it doesn't move, and we can rest in it. So my prayer is that it wouldn't take, like it did for David, a death, an affair, a murder, for you to wake up, look in the mirror, realize who you really are, and your great need for God. But that during a weird time right now, some things that are changing, that you would wake up, look in the mirror, and realize that because you are sinful, because we all are messed up, not okay people, that we have a desperate need for God. But he's met that need with Jesus on the cross. And that is never changing. And we can always find our identity in him. Thanks for being here. We're going to be coming back every Monday, Wednesday, Friday with these devotions. We hope you guys keep joining us. God bless.